This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.
Welcome to the January 2026 episode of RCV Clips, our podcast about all things ranked choice voting. I'm Chris Hughes, a member of the Resource Center staff. In today's episode, I'll be talking with Michelle Whittaker, Executive Director of Ranked Choice Voting Maryland, Communications Director at Rank the Vote, and fresh off a win for proportional RCV in Greenbelt, about ranked choice voting legislation in the legislative process. Michelle, thanks so much for being here.
Chris, I'm so glad to be here with you.
I know, I can't believe we haven't had you on the podcast, but now's the time.
I'm not going to take it personally.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Well, first off, congratulations on Greenbelt. I'm so excited about them getting proportional RCV off the ground the next couple of years.
Yeah, I'm really excited for Greenbelt and actually all of Maryland because this is a really monumental movement in our state because Greenbelt is the first city in Prince George's County, which is the second largest county in Maryland. And they're the first city in Maryland to advance PRCV. And so, for the last 20 years, Tacoma Park has been the lone jurisdiction that has been using ranked choice voting in Maryland. And that's despite interest both at the city and the county level to move ranked choice voting forward. So I'm really excited. We've got lots of work ahead with doing implementation in the city, voter education, supporting the work of both election administrators and reaching out to candidates that might be interested in running in the city. So it's going to be a fun 2 years as we're getting them ready for their next election. But it also really helps to set the stage for other jurisdictions that are looking at using ranked choice voting because they're seeing hey, here's a jurisdiction that's taking it on. They're going to be using it very soon. How do they do this implementation? So it gives us a really good roadmap of how to do this. Plus, we have an election coming up in Tacoma Park this year. So we're going to get a chance to do some of our work of just doing voter education in a community that's familiar with ranked choice voting, but helps to build that next step of what we need to do once Greenbelt has their first election.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of exciting work to come there, and I can't wait to work with the Board of Elections there and with you all to make sure that happens. I'm realizing we could do a full episode about Greenbelt, but we're actually here today to talk about state legislatures and ranked choice voting. So we're essentially doing How a Bill Becomes a Law, the ranked choice voting edition. I'll just say up front, if I've learned anything in doing this work, that every legislative session and every legislature is a little different. Running a local bill through a city council is different from running a bill through a different city council, let alone the difference between running local legislation as opposed to running state level legislation through a state legislature. For the purposes of today, in order to fit this into the length of a podcast episode, we're just going to spend some time talking about state legislative work that you all have been doing in Maryland, given that state legislative sessions are starting up this month. So I sort of wanted to just start with how you all start planning for this. What do you do before legislative session kicks up to plan for how you want to run a bill through session? How long before a session do you start planning? How detailed does your plan even get?
Yeah, so working at the state level, there's a lot of things that you just need to know in advance just to get started. And the first thing is that Maryland has a 90-day legislative session, and that's 90 straight days. So from the day they start, which they just started their session on January 14th, until sine die in April, we are in session. There's committee meetings happening. There's floor sessions. There's bills being introduced. There's lots of activity happening throughout those 90 days. And there's some key dates along the way that mark what is possible or what, kind of when are the key decision points within the legislative process for any bill that you're trying to move. So those are all things that we need to know in advance. The state comes out with the schedule for the session. Usually in the fall, we get that, so we know kind of with the start of session, when we have the potential introduction for both the budget, as well as what's called crossover day, and that's when bills need to be out of one chamber in order to move further in the General Assembly. And so those are all things that you have to know so that you're thinking about that as you're going through the session. So first you need to know some dates and put those on the calendar and hopefully have those kind of tracking those throughout the session. I think it's kind of fun in Maryland. The legislative office gives out these little postcard kind of size pads that have a countdown calendar. Basically, you can strip away every day so you're counting and you know like what day you're on. I think that's kind of a fun way to make sure that everybody keeps track and knows what's happening. And it also lists like what's happening on that day, like bill introduction is happening today, or the budget's being introduced, or crossover day, whatever it is. So it's all in there. So that's helpful. But in terms of planning for a session, so for the 2026 session, we began planning for that session right after the 2025 session ended. So we had debriefs with our partners and with our volunteers and bill sponsors, and we really looked at like what really worked during the session, where did we make some gains, what were some of the key questions that we want to make sure we answer in advance or that we've addressed well in advance so that they're not going to be a question coming up in the session. So we're looking at all those possibilities. And then over the summer, there's engagement with legislators over the summer at different conferences and other events where, you may have some of the, structure for a new bill, or you have the full language if it's a reintroduction of a bill. And you're just trying to make sure, who's available to be a sponsor, what they're looking at doing, all those sort of things. And you're also monitoring throughout the summer and fall of the year prior to session of like what's happening with leadership, staffing, any other events that kind of help to shape what might be the conversations that happen during session. And, you're just trying to make sure that you're ready to go and you're working with partners on this. So like RCV Maryland doesn't do this alone. We're part of a democracy table with groups like Common Cause and the League of Women Voters and many other groups. And so we're having discussions because we're talking about our bills specifically, as well as bills that we're supporting as a coalition, what's on the agenda for Common Cause and some of their key priorities so that we can help support each other, but we also know what's going on. Late last year, the former speaker, Delegate Adrienne Jones, announced that she was stepping down as speaker, and so that led to a lot of activity in the fall and actually November, December timeframe, where senior legislators in the House were making their case to be the next speaker. In the end, Delegate Jocelyn Pena-Melnick was chosen as the speaker. She's the first Latina to be speaker in Maryland, and she's already putting her mark on the House. She's, promoted new leaders to different leadership roles. She's created new committees, the Government, Labor, and Elections Committee, which is going to hear bills related to ranked choice voting, and she's set the tone for how she wants the House to operate. Particularly, one of the things that really struck me is how she's really focused on civility and respect, and about how that we all have kind of a seat at the table, which I think is really, reflective of what we want to do with reforms like ranked choice voting. So it's kind of nice to hear that from her. And so, our plans for the legislative session, we were making those in the summer and working on things, and some of the bills, the text of the bills remain the same, but we have had to quickly map out how we engage with new leadership, new committees, new chairs of committees, and just navigating like what's going on in this session and how the new committee is going to operate. And so that's a little bit of like a challenge, because it's like you try to make the best of what you can do in those 90 days, and sometimes the plans change, but that happens all the time. And I think one of the things that's most important is being able to be flexible and responsive to like what's happening, because we've had, even in the middle of past sessions, where there's something that happens that kind of shifts the tone, or like where people are really focusing on, and you have to be responsive and aware of that, and not just be tone deaf to like, well, I'm just going to keep moving and doing this, when that is not where people are, or how people are operating, or what's going to be most effective to get your message across, or to like work with different legislators. So that's all part of the planning. We have spreadsheets with all of the delegates, their room number, their email address, their committee assignments. And so we use that to make sure that we're sending out emails when we are trying to do introductions, and that we can map out and find, the various legislators that we need for different activities.
So it's a lot of planning, is what I'm
So
hearing.
it's a lot of planning. Yeah.
And just of a lot of, you're tracking a lot of different things, right? You're tracking
Yeah.
structure, you're tracking relationships, you're tracking rules, you're tracking like substance on the ground of like what has happened in elections in Maryland that gives me a narrative
Yeah.
for a bill, right?
Yeah.
There's all these things you're juggling. So it sounds to me like the answer to my question is like you're sort of always planning, and then also always like acting and pivoting on that plan.
Yeah. I mean, you have to have kind of a, what I always call like a living plan. So it's like, here's
Yeah.
what we're thinking of doing, but you're going back to it, you're looking at it, you're making modifications as you have new information, and you know what's happening. Because here, part of the thing that we have to deal with was once session starts. So there's several bills that can be pre-filed. So if you know that your legislator is pre-filing the bill, then first day of session, it will get a bill number, and you'll be ready to go, right out the gate. And you could have a committee hearing within the next like 2 weeks, which is very quick, right? Like, I mean, it's like the bill's introduced, committees are doing their organizational meetings the first week, and then it could be like the next week you're having your bill hearing, right? So you have to be on top of like, what do we need to do so that we're ready to go to move the bill forward? And so, part of that planning is not only like all the things we write down, but uh, the Maryland General Assembly has an online portal where you can log in and track bills and get email notifications of when your bill is going before a committee, or any other action that's happening with it. And that's also really helpful once the bill's in the system, to be able to know what the next step is with that piece of legislation. So there's several components of both using tools that the state has, as well as our own internal tools of tracking what's happening, and who's supportive, who we've talked to, all of those things that you're kind of putting together. And one of the things I'll just note is like, we've built our list of like, here's the legislators, their emails and their room numbers, which room assignments always change, but like we have all that information, and we're just updating that year after year, and sometimes even mid-year, if there's a vacancy that occurs and someone moves from the House to the Senate, or out of the legislature altogether. Like, all of those are things we have to track, especially if it's someone that we have to they're part of the committee, or the leadership that we would be engaging with.
Just a lot of balls to keep in the air,
Yeah.
and knowing where things are at. I mean, one thing I've noticed a lot too is just how quickly things happen sometimes in state legislatures. Like, we'll be asked to testify at a hearing with 48 hours notice, and that's a lot in a state legislature. 2 days, that's a lot of time to get ready. Other times, I've heard 6 hours before a hearing has been scheduled. It's amazing how quickly it happens. I think one thing that stands out to me as someone who's looking at this more from a national perspective is state legislatures genuinely are operating on their own timeline, and they also are operating for their state. They don't care about people out of state who might need to fly in for a hearing, who might need time to prepare and like get up to speed on the things in that state, right? Like, they're running things on their timeline because it's for their state. It's not for anybody else.
Yeah, and you have to be ready for that, because it's like, if you're going to testify at a bill hearing, you need to submit your testimony and sign up. I think it's 3 days in advance. Like, they have a whole calendar. Like, if the bill hearing is happening on Tuesday, you need to have submit everything by Friday, or whatever the day is that they have on the calendar. And so you really do have to be on top of it to make sure that you're not missing, a critical moment where because you can't sign up late to for a bill hearing. It's like if you miss it, and they won't hear from you.
Yeah.
Obviously, yes, you can send your testimony to legislators directly, but you miss that opportunity of speaking before the public, of getting it on record, where like you can share that testimony with others, and they know what's happening. And so, those are all things where you have to keep that in mind, and especially in a legislative body that is working under a very tight deadline. 90 days is not a lot. It goes by really quickly, right? And so you have to be on top of like what's happening, and whether you're working at the state level or the local level, you have to understand what the schedule is, or the rules around testifying for a bill and submitting your testimony and or other supporting documents on time, so that the committee gets that information. It's in the record. It's part of their deliberation process. So it's it's another one of those things that you're juggling to do, but you have to recognize it's a short window of time. Like 90 days will be over, probably by the end of this
Yeah,
podcast.
right. Yeah, by the time this is out.
So that's why you're like, yeah. So it's just
Yeah.
like you've just got to be ready to go. So
Yeah, I mean, so much of that, the speed of things seems to me to put additional pressure on advocates like you all, like one, having established relationships and like longevity in the state, people, so that people know who you are and what they're going to get from you, and like why they might be able to trust you as someone who's talking about whatever reform it is you're coming to them with, right? Like building those relationships and building that trust makes it so that
yeah,
you can get
yeah,
more progress when you're under such an insane time crunch and people's attention is so deeply divided. I think to that end, I'm sort of curious to talk a bit about how you make some of those strategic decisions and how you get your materials and your people in place so that you're building those relationships over time. So I one thing I'm particularly curious is how do you all think about, picking your prime sponsor, both broadly like for a bill and specifically in pursuit of like making sure you have the right relationships in your legislature?
yeah. So there's a couple things that come into play. One is, where or what legislator or legislators have the energy and passion for it. And so, some of those folks are, they may come to the front really quickly, and you know who they are, and you can be like, great, let's, you're going to be moving forward and championing this bill in the House or Senate. In other cases, it might not be. You may be developing a relationship, and you didn't know at first that they were going to be so passionate about it, but they've been kind of waiting in the wings. I remember I was talking to a legislator last session who, I have a good personal relationship with. They live in the same county that I live in, and so, we've just built up a nice rapport. And they, near the end of the session, they were just like, Michelle, next year you should give the bill to me because I'll get it across the finish line. He was just like so excited about this, and it's like, oh, okay. So I take note of that, and I reach out to their office and see like, okay, well, you were really jazzed about this. Where can we fit that in? Like, what are you interested in doing? And maybe it might be that they're a bill sponsor, or maybe they're a key co-sponsor that are helping to bring in other people or do some other work on the legislation. And so again, that goes back to kind of doing some power mapping of like, what do you need? And who's going to best serve like your needs on both the House and Senate side of how you're moving the legislation forward. So there's a lot of like relationship building of just knowing where people are, what their passions are, what they care about, what helps them to feel like they feel strong enough to speak on that issue, and continuing to build up opportunities for them to be part of the process in whatever way. And some of it is even just like building relationships as seeking out their advice on things. So there's been other legislators who maybe have just been co-sponsors, or even weren't on primary sponsors on a bill, but they seem to have a good sense of things in the legislature. I have a good rapport with them. I'll talk to them and be like, okay, so what's your sense of this, or what are you hearing here? Is it worthwhile for me to reach out to this person or that person? And that's a useful way of building relationships, because then they feel like, oh, they trust me enough to like ask these
Yeah.
questions and get my advice on this. I'm going to provide some help to them. And then they may even see some opportunities that you wouldn't see, or be able to talk about different things that we didn't see as a strategy. And that's come out before. Like in previous years, there were some things of like, okay, so why do we keep on getting stuck in this one part of the process? What's happening, and
Hmm.
how can we get out of that? And it's like, oh, this is the structure of this. And it was something that I wouldn't know technically, because I don't, it's part of like the, everybody knows it who's been in the system, right? And it's one of those things where it's like, oh, you got to know that this happens here. And it's like, oh, okay, so I now need to be more aware of that. That's a helpful kind of tip that I can get. And then the other part is working with staff. So staff are a key. Building relationships with staff is very key, because they obviously are in some ways the gatekeeper to access to the
Yeah.
legislator, depending on their time and activities that they have on their committee. And so, having a good relationship with their staff and being able to be responsive and answer their questions also helps you to figure out where they can be most useful in moving your legislation forward, or being a sponsor, or whatever you need. And some of that, it just depends on what it is. Like, if you find out that somebody is the chair or co-chair of a caucus, or some type of issue group that might be useful to, again, get in front of that body to help other legislators know what the bill is and answer their questions, that's a good relationship to foster, to ask questions like, what's the opportunities, how do I get on your agenda, all those sort of things, to be part of those conversations that are happening. Because yeah, if you're not building relationships, then people don't really, they're not going to necessarily see you there, or like, feel like they're connected to whatever you're talking about.
Hmm.
I think the last 2 years of being in the state house, in the House of Delegates a lot, and a little bit more in the Senate chamber more, but like being there so consistently throughout the session, there was many times where even if I wasn't going to see a legislator, but I just saw them in the hallway, they were just like, "Keep doing it. I see you every day. You're doing it. You're doing it. You're
Yeah.
like, keep
Right.
on." And it's like they know you, and they respect that you're present and part of the
Yeah.
process and doing the work. And so I think that's the other thing, is like, if you can show people that you're as invested in the relationship of moving legislation forward and getting the support that they need to be an effective champion on a bill, they see that, and they'll trust you to do more, and they may
Yeah.
be willing to take the next like step in being, doing whatever is the next thing that they really need to do to step up to move bills forward. So you just got to build those relationships. It takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is like, it's just showing up and being there, right? Again and
Yeah.
again and again, and trying to make yourself as inevitable as possible.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Totally.
Totally. I mean, one other thing I'm curious about is, how do you pick what bill or bills you're going to introduce? Like, what policy specifically are you going for? Are you going for a local option bill for RCV? Are you going for a presidential primary? Are you going for some combination of multiple different RCV flavors? How do you think about that? And how did you make decisions here?
I mean, partially it's based on like the interest that you have. For
Hmm.
local option bills, it's like, is there a jurisdiction or multiple jurisdictions that would be, uh, you know, not only interested in this, but really move the ball on it, and support it, wholeheartedly. Do you have those folks? Okay, that you can move that. I think you're also looking at like, what are the kind of structural pieces to this. Like, if you're doing a statewide bill, like, who does that impact, and what are you kind of trying to answer to make sure that you've covered all your bases. Things like a presidential primaries bill. While sometimes people are like, oh, well, that's kind of an easy step, because it doesn't impact the you know Senate and House delegates. It's just for the
Hmm.
presidential primaries. That should be easier. Not necessarily, because you're talking about primaries that are run by that, governed by the uh, major parties in many cases. And so then, have you actually talked to the parties to see if they want to make this change.
Hmm.
If you haven't, then you probably aren't going to get very far with that bill either. You know, how does this impact the state board of elections or election administrators throughout the state or in specific counties that, have you had those conversations and engaged with them? And so there's some kind of a, it's a strategic decision that you're making about like what makes the most sense, as well as like being very practical about like where do we have the energy to move this forward to
Hmm.
really do this well. Because I don't want to put a bill out there that uh, you know is not going to do well, because we're not going to get interest from anyone, and we're not even going to get people motivated to come out and testify or
Yeah.
contact their legislators. So I'm really trying to find those bills that bring people passionately together and move them forward. And so that's kind of the mix of it. And then also like what, again, to the strategic part, what helps us move the ball forward with our municipalities, which in Maryland, they have any incorporated municipality has the ability to make any changes to their elections without getting permission from the state. So it's only counties and the city of Baltimore, which is considered a county in this respect, that have to go through the General Assembly to make a change
Hmm.
to their elections. So then the other piece that I'm looking at is, are there bills that help support municipalities being able to do more with their elections? And sometimes you're just trying to make sure, can we get RC tab certified, at the state level, so that if any city is looking to use this, they have what they need, right?
Hmm.
Or is there some other like structural piece that we need to make sure is in place for municipalities that helps them run their elections all independently, but like, creates a good connection between the local and the state? Those are all questions that we're trying to answer and see if there's bills that match kind of what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Local option bills, like our enabling bill for Montgomery County, is one that we've had and continue to have a lot of energy with that bill. And it's been what has motivated and brought RCU Maryland together 7 years ago, because it was something where people were like, we've had too many elections with non-majority winners, with split votes, and people were just like, what can we do? And it was finally this coalition of the willing and who were very passionate and ready to go. And we were able to introduce our first bill for this enabling bill that got unanimous support from the delegation. And since then, we've continued to maintain unanimous support. And the enabling bill this year, on R3 Day, it was voted out of the House delegation in favorable 17-0. So I was like, yes, there we go. We're continuing
Hmm.
our record
Yeah.
of support there. And it's like, okay, that's the next, it moves the energy forward. We've got, more momentum to go into when we're in committee and going from there. And so you're really trying to make decisions about where is the where's the passion, where's the energy, what helps you support the work that you're doing throughout the year. All of those things matter, because I know, like, we do the enabling legislation. We also are looking at legislation that supports our municipalities, and we have at the same time work that's happening with our municipalities that are looking at introducing legislation, or as Greenbelt, working on implementation. And they have questions that come up that relate to, how do I engage with the state board of elections on XYZ? And so if we are able to come out with legislation at the end of the session that says, we've answered this question for you, that moves us forward with the work that we're doing at the local level. So those are all the sort of things that we really kind of monitor, kind of try to keep an eye on and see, like, how can we move all of our agenda forward with what we're doing. And I'll also just say, like, I want to be ambitious but realistic about like what is possible and doable in the state. There's lots of folks who are really interested in moving some statewide bills forward, and I hear them, and I get it, and I do want to see that eventually. I also know that, like, in order to get there, we have to lay a firm foundation of like how this is going to work, how we've seen, municipalities and other jurisdictions come
Hmm.
together and say that they want this, and have more. a larger kind of group of people who are all behind it, who have used ranked choice voting in an election, who, all of those things matter. And so I try to remind people we have to build that foundation if we want this to happen in the future, but to last. Like we can't just like throw it at the wall and hope that it sticks. We want it to last. And the way that we do that is by making sure that there's these different connector points that really tie it all together. So,
yeah. Well, on that point, one thing I think is I've not heard in RCV world a lot of like explicit conversation about, partly because I'm not in a ton of legislative strategy conversations, but I think partly because it hasn't always been top of mind for people, but is around a lot of what we've been talking about of like, how do you make progress in a session, even if it's not necessarily a legislative win? Like, how do you mark out markers of progress for you internally to RCV Maryland, for your coalition, to make people feel like maybe we didn't get a bill signed by the governor, but we hit these milestones this session. This is like, this shows that we're still chipping away at this process.
So it goes back to the earlier talking about the planning and kind of tools that you're using to track things. So that spreadsheet that I have of all the legislators, I'm tracking who's a bill sponsor and who's indicated support, from, their strong supporter to leaning support, or we need to like, follow up with them more, whatever the question is, right? Mm-hmm. I am also using that as like, if we, if we had a legislator who was, needs engagement because they're not on the fence or whatever, and I can show that I've moved them to supporting this bill, or I can show that, we not only did we get the delegation to vote unanimously in favor of the bill, but we got a vote in the GLEE committee, Government, Labor, and Elections Committee.
Our new one.
Our new committee, then I'm going to be like, that's a big win if we can get that, get a vote in the committee. So I look at this similar to how I approach campaigns. When you're working in a campaign, political or advocacy campaign, there are wins all along the way. And if you don't take time to acknowledge each one of those wins, you're never going to feel like you're moving the ball forward. So you have to say like, hey, we got unanimous support here. Yes, that's great. We had our bill hearing, and we had, 10 people come out to testify, and they were really dynamic and had great testimony before the committees. That's great. Celebrate that. We got a vote. Great. Celebrate all of those things and name those not only during the process, but then when you're doing your debrief and evaluation after the session, to say like, here's where we've moved the ball. So if you're not tracking it, and if you're not saying like these are things that are important, then people are going to miss those milestones in between it that show like this is a win by getting it passed and signed by the governor clearly is a big one. But you also have a win when you're moving more legislators towards your support of this, when you're getting more people to see the benefits of what you're trying to do, when you are able to see like you've gotten one step farther than you did before because of what you've been engaging with. Those are all the things that are clearly important milestones that you should be celebrating. And so that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be sending out a message soon about like the House delegation. And then, as we continue to move forward, we're going to be sending out and celebrating all the work that we're doing throughout this process, because you have to do that. That's how you also make it feel less of like, you're, nothing's moving forward, because it can seem like that if the only goal that you've identified is that last piece, you might have missed a lot of things in between. So,
yeah. I think it's something that I need to like continually remind myself of like, there's a million small wins along the way, and every once in a while you're going to get a big win, but you need the small ones. You need to get the small ones, and you need to like recognize the small ones to keep your momentum and to keep that motivation and to get that sense of progress. It just everything we're doing on the implementation side, everything you're doing on the advocacy side just takes time and investment, because we're trying to shift a whole system from one place to another.
Yeah. And I'll just, one example, this is at the city level, but like I was talking to a city council member, and they had been on the offense about things, but we had just come to their latest meeting and we were talking about some of the updates, and he came up to me and he was like, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm all for it. Like I'm 100% behind. I get it. I understand why. I really appreciate all you're doing." I was like, "This is amazing. Thank you." And I was like, I gave him a big hug, and I was like, "We're going to get you on film and, kind of say a few words about why you support this." You got to celebrate those moments, because you could just be like, "Oh, great. We've got that person." And if you don't tell anybody, nobody will be like, "Well, that's movement."
Right. Don't hide your light under a bushel, as
exactly,
they say.
yes.
Yeah.
So you got to celebrate, give people high fives, hugs, whatever, when you get those wins, and enjoy that. So
yeah. I think this work, like, to be so corny about it, but I think this work requires a lot of joy, and like the more you can bring that out in people, the like better they'll feel about working with you, right?
Yeah, joy and fun. This has to be fun. I don't, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not somebody who's just like not interested in having fun and joking around with people. I feel like there's a way to be joyful, playful, figure out things throughout the day that make it like fun and exciting. And so I like to find those moments, and that's also like part of like building relationships with people too. It's just like once you just
be someone people want to see, right? Like
yeah. So I I just it's what makes it worthwhile when I can be around people, and even if there's a small change that happens in the dynamic of like they understand more, or they just see me and they're like, "I see you and I recognize what you're doing." Those are all kind of wins, and just like people know what you're doing. People can be excited about you being here and in the fight for whatever you're doing. So hopefully find some good joy, fun moments with it, and good people who want to be excited about the work too. And yeah, that's my, I guess, final message there.
All right. Well, I think that's a great note to end it on. So thanks again, Michelle, for getting on and sharing everything you've learned in the last, insert number here. How many years? Like, I guess more than seven, right? Like with RCV at this point. Like, plenty of years. Your career's worth of wisdom here.
Thank you. And I'm excited to work with you all. We've got some things coming up, and I'll try to give you more than 48 hours heads up of the bill hearings that are coming up. Look, but
we work with what we got.
There you go.
All right, thanks, Michelle.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And now for this month's final round, where we share an interesting bit of trivia, a useful tidbit, or just something we thought was cool for folks to know about ranked choice voting. Here's Ryan Kirby with this month's final round.
Did you know that more than 100 different pieces of RCV legislation were introduced in state legislatures last year? Bills covered all manner of RCV applications, including local option bills, state voting rights acts, RCV and presidential primaries, and more. As of this recording, another dozen bills have already been introduced in state legislatures this year. This bill bonanza makes it this month's final round.
Thank you for joining us today for the January 2026 episode of RCV Clips, produced by the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. Make sure to subscribe to the show for the latest episodes and updates. Please take a minute to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform too. For more information about RCVRC and Ranked Choice Voting, check out our website, www.rcvresources.org. The production of this podcast is supported by the generosity of our donors. Donations can be made directly on the website. Please don't hesitate to contact us with any questions at donate@rcvresources.org. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RCVResources, and on Facebook and LinkedIn at Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at RCVRC. Our theme music is Flutterbee by Poddington Bear. Until next time, I'm Chris Hughes on behalf of the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center.